lovelies. So, restoration has begun on the restaurant. For those of you just joining this series, I am trying to save, restore, reopen a restaurant in Kigali. It's been my local for many, many years, and it kind of spiraled into decline. So I thought I would have a go at resurrecting it. And this series is all about taking you along for the ride, just to see how difficult or easy it is to start and run and manage a business in Rwanda. Because over the years, I mean, I have always had a consultancy company here. I also have a piano tuning and repair operation going on. But neither of those are particularly big businesses, you know, they're mostly me. Whereas this one is a big business. This is going to be a cafe restaurant, including staff and other people involved. So it's quite an undertaking. So that's why I'm doing this, because if you're thinking about coming to Rwanda and you're thinking about starting a business, you know, there are a few things that you need to know, and we're going to be learning together, because a lot of this stuff I've never had to do before. And I also need to do a quick apology, because I know a lot of people were tuning in. I was starting a Rwandan folklore series, and that is still going ahead, but I started that, I did the introduction for that before I took on the restaurant. So it's been a little bit delayed by the fact that I've got a massive amount of other things to focus on at the moment, but we will be starting that. We will be doing the Rwandan folklore series soon-ish. So today is going to be a little bit of a complainy video. Usually when I've got something to complain about, we do it on my back porch and we sit out there and I've got my tea and, you know, I tell you about what's been on my mind. But at the moment I've got a really leaky tap out there. So I thought I'd come to the front porch instead, but I do have my cup of tea just behind me. So today I'm going to talk you through what my experience was of registering the business, because as I mentioned in the first video in this series, the old business was kind of run into the ground a bit. You know, there are a few outstanding payments and a few problems that meant that I wasn't buying the business. What I was doing is I bought the assets, so all of the equipment, the kitchen equipment and the furniture and all of that. They're closing that business. I'm opening my own business, brand new business, in my name, and restarting it, which leads to all kinds of things to think about, especially because the name of the business is called Caffeinated, and it's been here for years. It's been here since about 2016, so 10 years now, and it's a much loved institution. People throughout Kigali really love this place. And a lot of people still talk about what it used to be in the beginning. So in the beginning, it was beautiful. It's all about the garden. We used to have the fire and the cocktails and fairy lights. It was a little magical oasis. And that's what I would like to make it again. But everybody knows the name Caffeinated, so that's what it originally was. And then it was taken over by somebody else, and it still maintained the name Caffeinated, but it operated under the business name Kaiser Casa. So you find this with a lot of businesses here, like Delizia Ice Cream in Kigali Heights, and I think Kazana, the Indian restaurant, you know, it's got one name on the sign, but the actual business name that you get on the receipt from the business is a different name, because, you know, people maintain the name because it's well known and it's loved. But the actual operational name of the company is a different name, which you see on your receipts. And I think that's kind of going to be our situation. I feel like it's a bit of a grey area, but I want to keep Caffeinated on the sign in some form, because everybody knows where that is. And I've also inherited the social media accounts, so I can change the name on the social media accounts, but I don't want to kind of throw away all of the reviews. I think the Google business account has got something like 400 odd reviews, and for the most part they're good. Until it started to spiral, they're really good reviews, and I don't see much business sense in just throwing all of that away. And also the name Caffeinated, so it was a Spanish restaurant set up by my friend Maya, who was the Spanish element of this. And she named it after her daughter, who is called Keza. And Keza in Kinyarwanda means beautiful. So, you know, it is her daughter's name on the restaurant. And, you know, I know Keza. I've known Keza since she was tiny. And I feel like it would be nice to keep that. People can find the place, it's named after something that meant something, you know, and it's got all of the reviews. So it's a bit of a grey area, but I have had to start my own business under its own name. And in order to do that, I had to go to Rwanda Development Board. So I'm just going to talk you through, I mean, it was an absolute fiasco. And I spent a good few days basically tearing my hair out over this, and I thought I would talk you through just what happened to me, because, you know, Rwanda really does build this sort of major reputation on being a very easy place to come and start a business, but the hype and the reality can be a bit different. Now, obviously, it all revolves around online systems, and in any country, if an online system is working well, life is easy, you breeze through it. But unfortunately, I hit a bit of a glitch, and I broke the matrix basically, and it led to, oh my god, such a headache. So I've since discovered it's a problem that many other people have discovered as well. So I'm just going to talk you through, beginning to end, my experience of what happened. And I haven't had to deal with RDB for about, you know, well over a decade. Like when I started my first company, there was no online portal at that point. You literally just filled out the paperwork by hand and you went to the different departments and it got done. It took me probably, I don't know, a day to open the business, a day to open the accounts before. It was a long time ago. The world was very different. It has taken me a lot longer using this online system. So, to register a business in Rwanda, you have to go to the RDB, which stands for Rwanda Development Board, online portal. And this is supposed to be an all singing, all dancing online platform where you click a few buttons and you get yourself registered, you get everything working. So I went on there, and the first thing that you have to do is to choose a business name. Now, originally it was Casa Keza, then it was Keza Casa. You cannot really create a similar name like that anymore. They've recently created a new system, and part of that new system means that whatever name you choose for your business has to be pretty much completely original. And they have a little name checking service, so you can check if the name you want is available. And it's problematic because I was entering things into that system that didn't even share a word with any other business that was registered, and it was still telling me that it was like 92% similar to other business names, and you can't have it because it's too similar to other business names, even though the name I'd chosen hadn't been registered with any other business. So it was extremely overzealous in that respect. And no matter what I tried, I couldn't find an original business name that I wanted. I mean, it's always been about the garden at Casa Keza. That's why people go there. It's got a lovely little garden. So I was thinking of like calling it the garden, which I knew was a long shot, you know, because there are loads of other companies called, you know, something garden. So I couldn't get that, but I at least thought that, you know, there would be something original I could come up with, and I was trying and I couldn't get the percentage number to come down. And then I realised at the bottom that it said, like, there was a button to confirm and continue. And so I thought, oh, well, even if it's kind of similar, even if I can get the similarity down to say like 80%, maybe it will still let me register the business. But every time I clicked that button, it refreshed the page and dumped me back on the home page. Like there was no way to continue. I even cleared the cache on the site thinking that was the problem, and it still wouldn't do it. It just kept dumping me on the main page, so I couldn't continue. So that was my first trip back to RDB. Is I got on my bike because the RDB office is just up the road, and I drove over there and I sat in the office and I said, look, I can't get this to work. Everything that I try to think of, it tells me no. And when I try to continue anyway, it just dumps me on the main page. And that's when I discovered that actually every time you go to RDB, you have to take your own laptop with you. So there are two problems when you go to RDB. First, you have to take a laptop. And secondly, you have to take your own internet connection, because the RDB office hasn't got Wi-Fi. So if you want to go and get help with anything to do with your business, you need your laptop to log into your business, but you also need to take your own portable Wi-Fi or hotspot with you in order to connect to the internet in order to access your business information, which seems absurd. I mean, that for a development board, that seems absurd that they wouldn't have a Wi-Fi connection that you can connect to in order to get what you need to do done. But that is the situation. So that's worth knowing before you rock up there. But anyway, the guy sat there, and we eventually came up with a couple of names that, you know, he could register. And he told me that because I was sitting there in front of him, it was easier for him to get permission for me to use a name, a common name, than it was if I was doing it at home. Now, again, that shouldn't be possible. You should either be able to do it or not do it, but you shouldn't need to go physically to an office, sit in a queue to talk to somebody who can get something done for you, because that completely negates the entire point of having an online system. So anyway, he proved that it was possible, and that it is possible to register a name more easily if you just go straight to business registration and skip the name reservation part of the website. Just ignore that, just go straight to registering your business. And so I came home to think about what to call it, and I spent another evening like just entering stuff into it. And in the end, I decided, sod it, I fell back onto British folklore, and I named the company after the name of a Welsh goddess, because I knew for absolute certain, yes, it's maybe a bit of a convoluted name, but there ain't no chance anybody else in Rwanda has ever registered that name. So that's what I did. I'll tell you more about that later on, but eventually I found a name I could register. So it wasn't a name that I really wanted for the business. I mean, it's not a bad name. I'm happy to take it, but it's not the name I would have liked to have had. It was purely the name I could actually get. So all of that was a total palaver, but that pales in comparison to what happened next. So that evening I sat down, I filled out all the information for my application using the online portal. That part is fairly straightforward. It just needs to know your name, your address, and for the address, you need to know your full street address of the business. So that is your city, your district, your sector, your cell, and your village. And most people don't know what that is. Most people know the street number, and if you've got a house number, not all houses do, but you need to know the full lot. Now that should probably be on your rental agreement. If not, you're going to have to go and ask people, because again, it's one of those things. It's like, you know, online systems should make things easier, but they tend to make them much harder. Street numbering should make things a lot easier. They tend to make it harder, because, you know, you always had to know your full address before. But when they brought in street numbers and house numbers, that should have replaced that. You know, you should just be able to give your street number and your house number, done. But now you need your street number, your house number, and still all of that that you needed before. And when you get down to cell and village level, who the hell knows? You know, who knows? So the only way I know anything is by asking my staff or by trying to find my rental agreement. Even the landlord of that property didn't know the village off the top of their head. They're like, oh, well, yeah, we don't know. So if they don't know, how am I supposed to know? You know what I mean? It's just such an unnecessary faff. But so you get through that. And then you need to put down any shareholders in the business if there are shares involved. You can register a company limited by shares or by guarantee if you are starting, well, in the UK, you'd have a company limited by guarantee if it's a non-profit organisation. So I guess you can do that here as well. Of course, I went by shares. I am the sole shareholder of my company. You can do what you like, but you've got to enter all the details, and that's pretty much it. And yeah, then you submit it. So that part of it is not too distressing. That part of it is fairly straightforward. But then what happened was, did all of that, and literally within about 30 minutes, I got back an email saying, congratulations, your business has been registered. And I was totally like, whoa, that's incredible. That was like the last time I applied for my visa renewal. I got a message back within about an hour saying, yep, it's approved and ready. And I was like, whoa, that is stunningly efficient. That is unbelievably efficient, incredible. And a few minutes later, I got a text message from RRA, which is Rwanda Revenue Authority, who are the tax department, basically saying, you are now registered for tax. So according to the tax department, I had a registered business. According to RDB, I had a registered business. And then, then I went onto the portal to look at my business and print off my business certificate, and nothing was showing up. So I had my other two businesses showing, but not my new one. So I went back to the email that I got, because it said from RDB, it said, congratulations, you've been approved. Click on this button to view your business details. It wasn't a clickable button. It's not a clickable button. It's not a hyperlink. I was sitting there clicking and going nowhere. So I couldn't access my business information from the email. So I was sitting there and I looked through all of RDB. I'm like, where the hell is my business? So of course, I think it was a weekend, so I couldn't go to RDB. So I was spending another few days basically just waiting to get this set up, which was frustrating because I need a bank account in order to start running things through the bank account for my business so that I could start, claiming expenses and getting everything set up. And in order to do that, I need a business registration certificate. And in order to do that, the business has to appear on the online portal. So knowing that I couldn't go to RDB immediately, what I decided to do was try to contact customer services. And on the portal, it's got a place where you can open a customer service ticket to talk to somebody. But in order to do that, you have to enter either the TIN number of your registered business or the application number of the application that you submitted, neither of which it had given me. I didn't have my TIN number because my business apparently had disappeared into the ether. I didn't have an application number because I didn't get one. So you cannot open a customer service ticket through the online portal without having one of these two pieces of information, neither of which it gives you. I mean, let's just put it this way. RDB is like if Kafka opened a theme park. You start off, you're like, full of joy and enthusiasm, excitement to start a business in Rwanda. You go in there and within a couple of hours, your brain is broken. You're just like sitting there going, this doesn't work, does it? What should have taken like a day at most took me several hours over several days. I mean, this is the beginning of the problem. So I obviously couldn't fix the problem myself, and I couldn't open a customer service ticket. So once again, I got back on my bike and I drove back to the office. And again, it's okay for me because they're around the corner, but like if you're coming from somewhere like Nyamirambo or outside Kigali, this is a faff. This is an absolute faff. And I got there and I was already not in a great mood, and I walked in and there was about 15 to 20 people sitting there and one one person at the desk. And I've seen this many times in Kigali, is, you know, you've got queues out the door and you've got one person dealing with each issue. And bearing in mind that if you have to physically go to RDB, you're probably not there for a small issue. Like, you've probably got a major glitch in the online system, or, you know, you've got a dozen forms to fill out. So each person is gonna need quite a bit of time to get through their issue. And you've got one person sitting there. And you're like, you know, there's mass youth unemployment in this country. Like, you've got a whole load of graduates in this country who don't have jobs. Why is there only one person on the desk? This was kind of my level of angst as I was sitting there, like not moving in the queue. And so, you know, you can be sitting there for a really long time. So I used Mzungu privilege. We've talked on this channel before about queue cutting as a foreigner. I've done a whole video about this, and I've explained why it happens, when it happens. And, you know, we have established that, you know, if you're foreign, especially if you're white, you can get seen for things sometimes a bit quicker. And yeah, not proud of it at all, but I used it. It's balancing that weight of, does my own personal shame feel worse than the idea of sitting in a queue for the next 3 hours to see somebody who probably won't be able to fix the problem I have? It was that. And unfortunately, I overcame my shame very quickly. It was like, no, I need to get out of here. You know, I've got 101 things to do because I'm setting up a business. I need to get out of here, as does everybody else in this room. But I've got a magic passkey. And my magic passkey was a contact that my friend had given me. And she said, this guy's really helpful. And I called him and I said, hi, I'm sitting in the RDB office, can't get the online system to work. Can you help me? And he came and he found me, and he found me somebody to sit down with me and sort the problem out. So, yeah, it was shameful, and I wish that I didn't have to do it. I did do it. I wish that I didn't have to do it, because I wish that the system was better. But I did do it. I have no other excuse. I did it. It was me. I needed to get out of there with my sanity intact. So essentially what happened then, so I sat down with this young guy, and, you know, I had learned from the last time. I'd taken my laptop with me, I'd hotspotted it to my phone to get an internet connection. He looked over the problem. It took a minute to explain the problem, because he kept saying, oh, but there's your business there. And I was like, yeah, that's my other business. I have more than one business. That's my other business. The one that I have registered is not showing up. But once we got past that, then he asked me something about my passport. I can't remember exactly what he asked, but it was something like, has your passport expired, or something like that? And I said no. And then I remembered that 2 years ago in 2024, I had to renew my passport, because, you know, every 10 years your passport expires, you have to get a new one. So I told him about that, and I said, well, you know, I did renew my passport, but that was like 2 years ago, and my visa and my Rwandan ID is linked to my new passport. And he went, that's what the problem is. So it turns out that if you already have a business in Rwanda, but between your registering your old business and registering your new business, your passport expires in between then any business, new business that you start after that will just disappear into the void. It will just poof, you know, it will register, but it will not show up on your account. And apparently, this is a major issue. I was actually, when I was talking about this in a business forum, somebody else said, same thing happens with land registration. They went through exactly the same thing. And other people were describing exactly the problem that I had. And the thing that is so frustrating is, at no point, nowhere on the system does it tell you that this is what the problem is or how to fix it. Because the way to fix it is you have to open a brand new RDB account under the new passport and a completely different email address. Then they will assign the new business to that, and then you have to go back to your old account and you have to update your new passport information for every business on there individually. Like, you can't click and do a batch update of information. You have to go through each one individually and update your passport information. Then they have to send that to the Registrar General, and you have to sit there and wait for confirmation that your new passport is acceptable. So you sit around and you do that. Thankfully, the guy helping me was able to hurry that along a bit, because he had like a special connection. He had a phone call up to the head office. When that's eventually done, I think they can transfer the new business onto the old account, and it all kind of merges together, and eventually you can see all of those businesses on the same account. Now, it seemed like that was something you can do at home, like you can update your passport information on those businesses through the portal at home, but I'm not entirely sure how, because he didn't really show me how to do that. But at the same point, there is no way you would ever know that that was the problem, and you would never know how to fix it yourself at home. Instead, it just disappears, your new business, into the ether, and you have the problem that I have, where it tells you on SMS and email that you've got a registered business, but on the portal it doesn't exist. And at that point, that broke my brain, because I was like saying, but how is this happening? Why is it this bad? And the guy just said, we're testing the system, he said. And that absolutely broke my brain, because, you know, in any logical world, you test your system before you make it live to the public. That's the entire point of testing, is you test a system, you try every conceivable way of breaking it that you can, not just on the computer that you built the system on. You try it on different devices. You try it on Android, you try it on Apple, you try it on a laptop, you try it on a PC, you try it on a phone, and you try actively to break the system. You don't put a experimental system live and allow the public to break it for you. It's not just me. There are other people reporting this problem. How is this system live? And like they say, you know, oh, it's our brand new system, and there's a lot of pride in saying that we've got a brand new system, but the brand new system is glitchy as hell. You know, it breaks at the drop of a hat. So, you know, if this is the new system, can we go back to the old one, please? Because it worked a bit better. So yeah, I know I'm getting grumpy, and I know it's weird to see me grumpy on the front porch, because usually I'm grumpy on the back porch. But due to dripping tap today, I'm grumpy on the front porch. But yeah, it's just like, logically, you know, it breaks your brain. It breaks your brain. And the guy was saying, oh, you know, well, you have to be patient, he said, because, you know, we're developing, we're not developed. And I'm thinking, no, that doesn't work as an excuse in this. It's like, developing suggests that you don't have the tools and the resources at your disposal. You do, you know, you've got the software package, you know, you've got the IT technicians in your building, you know, you've got access to the internet, you've got all the computers that you need to do this. I don't think it's a developing country problem. I think it's an office efficiency problem. And I know that makes me sound like a smarmy cow. I you know, I'm sorry, but I don't think it's about being a developing country. I think it's about office efficiency. And yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, to be fair, we have online horror stories in the UK as well. We have online horror stories all over the world, but it's about how your department deals with that problem, and the forethought and the forward planning, and how you react to the fires that start, you know, how quickly you put them out, and not, absolutely not testing your brand new system live on the public, because that is just an insane concept in any country. You know, you test your system and then you make it live. But anyway, and if you discover along the way that there is a major glitch like this, you take that part of the system offline until it's fixed, and you know, you provide another way of doing it. But anyway, so I'm just checking my notes here, but I was definitely sitting in RDB by 10:15, because that's when I called my contact to say, look, help. So I must have arrived around 10 o'clock, got myself up there, sat there for a while, looked around, realised the queue was not moving, there was one person on the desk. So at 10:15 I called my contact to come and save me. And so I guess maybe like within about 10 minutes I was sitting down with this advisor, this helper, and we wrapped up that process by just gone 12 p.m. So I spent 2 hours there, not including the first time that I went there to ask about the problem registering a name. This was the second time I went there, and from sitting down with the guy, I was sitting down trying to get through this for at least an hour and a half, and it was difficult. You know, there was a point at which he was just asking me the same questions over and over and over again. And no matter what answer I gave, it was like I hadn't answered the question and he asked me again. And at one point I was just like, I was looking at the desk and there was this tiny little speck of dust and I just fixed on that and I was just staring at it. Because, you know, there were like 10 minutes or so in between questions where nothing was being said or, you know, didn't require my input, and I was just staring at that little fleck of dust, just like feeling the will to live leave me. You know, and he was a perfectly pleasant young man. He was very nice, but it took almost 2 hours to get that done when it should have taken like 30 minutes tops. You know, I mean, how did that take that amount of time? And in between all of that, there was a funny little interlude that happened where another foreigner came up. And she sat down, because what often happens is you will be with somebody who is helping you, but they will multitask. Is whilst they're talking to you, they'll also call up other people who will come and go and answer questions and come and go, and they'll answer their phone or they'll send a text message. You know, all of this is going on at the same time. So, you know, you are never the main character in a customer service situation. And this lady, she came up, bless her heart, she'd been sitting there forever, you know. And she was asking about, she clearly had this very, very urgent situation where she was due to sign a business contract that day with another company who were renting out one of her properties. She wanted to check that the person signing the contract was actually, you know, a member of the business that they said they were from. Now, in the UK, easy as pie, we have this government body called Companies House. Anybody can go on there, and for the price of about £1 or 2,000 francs, you can pull the business information from any company registered in the UK, and you can see who is registered on the board. You know, you can see all the information, where the business is registered, the contact information, you know, shareholders. It's really easy to do. Here in Rwanda, I assumed that we had that, but we don't. And it was really, really interesting listening to her, because she was clearly in a bit of a panic. This was a time-sensitive issue, you know, where you would assume you could just hop online, you know, look up the business information, make sure that the person is who they say they are and the company is what they say they are, go off, sign the contract. But here they said, oh no, we don't actually tell you information like that. No, that information isn't public. And that was news to me. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So if you want any information, then what you need to do, you have to write an official letter, and I think it was take it to the Secretary General or somebody like that, and wait for approval to get the information about the business. And she's like, but I've got to sign the contract this afternoon. And in any sensible situation, that information should be available at home. You know, yeah, sure, for an admin fee of like 1,000 francs or 2,000 francs, sure. But it isn't. And so she had to go off and try and find this office. I don't know if she ever got that done. Anyway, moving on. So after 2 hours, 2 long hours at RTB, I managed to get my account updated so that it showed all of my businesses on one portal. And then, just as a final kick in the teeth, I said, I need to go and open a bank account. Can you print out the certificate for me, the business certificate? Because that's what all of this was about. In order to open a bank account, I have to have the business certificate. So that's what all of this was about. And sure, he said, and he printed it off for me. Wasn't until the next day I got to the bank and he printed off the wrong bloody certificate. So you have two certificates when you finally register your business. You have one that says Certificate of General Registration or something, and another one that says Full Certificate of Registration, and they look kind of identical. And they printed off one of them, and I needed the other one. And even though I'd said I was going to go and open the bank account, he didn't give me the one that I needed to open the bank account. And, you know, either he did that deliberately, just as a kind of, oh, you know, I haven't enjoyed these past 2 hours we've spent together staring at a table, or as an employee of RDB, he didn't know which RDB certificate people needed in order to open a bank account. Either one of those is not a good look for the country's development board. I don't know which one of those two it was. I'm beyond caring, because I'll tell you all about opening the bank account in the next one, because that was also, I mean, between the two, RDB and opening a bank account, they are both difficult. Or at least for me, they were both very difficult. I think if you haven't changed your passport in between, you know, and you don't already have a business registered with RDB, I think this process is a lot smoother. I think you can probably do it all online quite easily, provided you can come up with a company name that nobody's ever heard of before. I think it would be a lot easier. I just managed to completely break the system, as have a few other people, because there was a little bit of an administrative glitch that they hadn't tested for. Maybe they'll fix it, maybe they won't, but it's worth being aware of this before you go in there. Anyway, I've been talking for a long time, my tea's going cold. I hope that some of what I've told you is useful. Yeah, I am not the business registration guru, so, you know, I probably don't fire complicated questions at me, but, you know, small things I might be able to answer in the comments below. But let me know your experience of registering a business with RDB, because, you know, there's so much hype about how easy it is. There's so much hype about how easy, how quick it is. I don't know. I think it maybe is if you don't have any other issues. But yeah, we got it done eventually. I now have the business registered, so that's a step forward.